Parliament has resumed this week, and we've been seeing a lot of things come out of Canberra. To help us navigate exactly what's going on, I have the pleasure of being joined by Senator Malcolm Roberts, one of our Freedom senators that are there that helped get Pauline Hanson elected in Queensland. Senator Roberts, welcome to the show.
Hi there, Joel. Thank you very much for having me.
I have had a lot of people very concerned about some of the policies that have been coming out of Canberra. I do believe there were some 18 policy agendas that the government, Anthony Albanese as Prime Minister, has put forward, some of which include climate change, some of which include the construction policy basically being abolished, the building code. What's going on, and what are the big things that you're seeing on the parliamentary policy agenda?
Well, it is a new parliament, so we don't know how everyone will behave, but I'll go to the government's, it was read by the Governor General, but it is actually the government's agenda, read out at the opening of the first session of the parliament. There's just so much baseless material. He talks about cost of living, rising cost of living. So the Governor General did this on behalf of his government. In other words, the government scripted it and wrote it for him, and he just parroted it out. Rising cost of living, but there was nothing concrete about it. He's basically saying to people, you're going to have a lot of pain. But then just skirted the topic, didn't talk about, and every one of his policies, almost every one of his policies will increase the cost of living. So it's just emblematic of what's happening in Canberra, Joel. We've discussed this before. They speak garbage, and they just think that because it's got nice words wrapped around it, people will accept it. And sadly, no journalist question them. And so we're left alone doing that, which we don't mind. But when you've got a Senate a House that's got a majority Labor and a Senate that's got a Greens Labor that only needs one crossbench, and they've got potential candidates for getting that one crossbench senator, it means the Liberals are neutered. It means that we'll only come into play certain times. So they're talking about climate change and its devastating impact. There's no devastating impact, none at all, because there's no climate change. The CSIRO has admitted to us that has failed to provide to us any statistically significant data showing that there is a change in any climate factor: temperature, snowfall, rainfall, droughts, storms, floods. Nothing. There's nothing changed. It's all natural cycles. Tensions in the region. He talked about 600,000 jobs for the regions due to unreliable wind and solar. The total, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, is 24,000 jobs right now. Where is he going to get 600,000 jobs? And he came into Parliament with during an election campaign in which he said, I have a plan. I have a plan for creating jobs. The only thing we've heard from the Labor government is that they will consult people to find out what their plans are. That's a summit. That's no plan. And then he rattled off six points, and then the bottom of the six, and we have an economy in need of cheaper energy and new skills. Cheaper energy, and his whole policy is driven towards maximizing energy prices. Because, Joel, what they've done, and it was the Liberals, Nationals as well, they're pushing policies that will raise prices of electricity so that you and I and every family in this country and every small business in this country will have higher electricity prices and therefore use less electricity. The maths just doesn't stick up. But there are pages and pages of stuff. The Uluru Statement from the Heart. So he raises cost of living, then doesn't talk about it, doesn't address how he'll fix it, mentions policies that will increase cost of living. Then he talks about Uluru Statement from the Heart, then a stronger economy with nothing other than support for people. What we need is fundamental restructuring of taxation, of regulation, of electricity, of water. These things that create the economic foundations. He talked about childcare, saying we'll legislate more on that. But nothing about productive capacity, nothing about infrastructure that's fair income, a fair go at work. The very things that he's talking about will put people out of work. I mean, I could go on and on, but everything is just trashing people, and they think we're stupid.
Yeah,
they think people are stupid.
Yeah. Well, let's backtrack a little bit. Cost of living. They threw that phrase around a lot during the election. They made a lot of grandiose promises and then they quickly backtracked them once Albanese and his government was elected. What is? Let's be real about this. Why do we see a massive cost of living crisis right now?
Inflation is the big one. And that inflation is due, not as Scott Morrison said, due to the Ukraine war. That's rubbish. We see growing inflation because the Reserve Bank of Australia flooded the joint with money at the government's request. And if they'd flooded the joint with money for real productive capacity improvements like infrastructure, then it would increase the productive capacity of the country and it wouldn't be inflationary. But this was spent on economic sherbet, just giving people stuff because of COVID restrictions that the government implemented. So the government has flooded the joint with money, and there's just too much money chasing too few goods. And
Right.
because of the restrictions, we've also got limitations on our supply chain. So we've got too few goods and too much money floating around, and that's what's causing inflation.
And so and that ties into what's been happening with the climate change debate. I thought it was quite interesting seeing this news out with the Greens basically holding up the entire government, saying that, and this is from the Sydney Morning Herald, saying that the government is going to rewrite the climate bill to win over the Greens. Why is that, guys? Just so some context for you, the Greens have 12 senators in the upper house. They managed to get 6 more elected in this election, and that means that they essentially have the balance of power in order to get things elected. Plus one, David Pocock, he's a Teal Independent Climate 200 guy. He's a former Wallaby. Between those 13 senators, the Greens plus David Pocock, that gives Labor the numbers to pass any bill that they want through the Senate. So the Greens are using that power, which I think Freedom parties should have got in the last election, but the Greens are using that power to basically become more radical and say, no, we don't want 43% climate change targets. We want harder than that. What's your concerns around this, Malcolm? And are we just sort of strapped in for the ride for this?
No, we're not just strapped in for the ride. You just discussed one side of the political landscape. We'll go through the seats. The LNP has 32. The ALP has 26. The Greens have 12. That means they have 38. There are 76 senators, but you need a majority, a clear majority. That can be one senator. So they need one. And then we've got One Nation has 2 of us. Jackie Lambie Network has 2. And United Australia Party, Ralph Babette has 1. I'm just looking over the blackboard. And David Pocock has 1. So all they need, as you said, is the Greens and the ALP and one other. So then they've got a clear majority. So the other side of it, the Liberals, and I'm going to use the word dopey, because the Liberals, because of the way they suggested preferencing, I mean, they don't like dealing with Jackie Lambie. And yet they preferenced her on the Senate ticket in Tasmania.
Yes.
Actually put her on the ticket.
Yes.
Insane. And the same people got rid of people like Erica Betts. The same people pushed WA, where if the Liberals had suggested sensible preferencing, they would have had a One Nation senator up in Western Australia. There's no doubt about that. And that would have given us 3. But more importantly, it would have given the Liberals and the National Party and us much closer to a majority. And the Liberals at the moment, even with every crossbench, let's have a look. Even with every crossbench, they can't do a damn thing.
Yeah.
Because they're tied. So the Liberals basically neutered themselves. They castrated themselves with their suggestions on preferencing. Same with South Australia. So we almost had the ability to fight back, but we've still got the ability to fight back because Parliament gives us a voice, and we've been very effective, Pauline and I, in using that voice in Parliament and raising issues. And for example, Sarah Hanson-Young today talked, who's a graduate from the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, she's one of them. The other one is Andrew Bragg. So she was talking about why land clearing is so bad. What they want to do is control the land. So we've got to be very, very realistically scared of what the Greens' agenda is. It is nightmarish. It is anti-human. But we have got the way of exposing these people in Parliament. So we will do that. Every now and then, if we hopefully get David Pocock, who seems to be a sensible bloke, and some of his policies are lunacy. They're like the Greens. But he strikes me as being intelligent. and hopefully he's not brainwashed. And so if we can give him the facts, hopefully David will realize. Now, I'm not totally hopeful. Oh, look what I've just handed to me.
What's that?
Can you see that?
No. Yep. What are we reading on the text there?
Okay. The House of Representatives, Climate Change Bill 2022. David Pocock was talking about this because he had it last week.
Right.
The Greens had it last week.
Yes.
One of the people in one of Pauline's advisors, one of the few that's left, because of the government's restrictions, asked for it 3 times for a briefing last week. We have not got a briefing, and now we've got the bill. So when the others saw it last week, we're just seeing it now for the first time. And then we'll look at, this is the way Labor operates.
Yeah, well, that's really frustrating. And just so you know, guys, you'd think that Labor would play fair. They don't. They absolutely don't. And before you go on, Malcolm, guys, we are going to talk about exactly the underhanded tactics that they've done to defund the crossbench so that they aren't able to have proper staffing in their offices that they had before the election to actually fight back against a lot of these bills. They are malnourishing these crossbenchers so that they can't put up proper arguments, and they are privileging certain senators so that they can secure their vote. It looks like they're courting David Pocock. So what is in this document so far from, what you can tell?
Well, I'm just looking at an article from yesterday in the paper by Joe Kelly, is the Australian's Canberra bureau chief. I'll quote, Mr. Bowen said he was prepared for the possibility of the legislation not passing the Senate, but he hoped it would not come to that. This legislation is not essential. It's desirable. It's best practice. So they're starting to water down their expectations. Our intention is to work cooperatively across the Parliament for good climate laws. As you just said, unilaterally, after Anthony Albanese talked for months about consultation, all the rest of it, just unilaterally cut our staff, removed 3 of our 4 parliamentary advisors. And that's significant, as you just pointed out, but I'll give you some data. Last 3 years of Parliament, we saw 30,000 pages of legislation. I can't read all that.
Wow.
Let alone do my research on it. And plus that's in addition to 30,000 pages of explanatory memoranda that covered that. So 60,000 pages I've got to read. Anthony Albanese came out with no consultation, no discussion, just said, you're losing 3, you're getting 1. That's it. Then we put the facts to him. He raised that to 2. And what I think is going on, they're not only trying to nobble us, they're really trying to nobble the Teals.
Yeah.
So Mr. Bowen said he had welcomed discussions with crossbenchers and chastised the opposition for failing to come to the table. We asked him 3 times last week for a briefing, and he hasn't given it to us. Now he's sent us the climate change bill, so we'll wait our way through that. But listen to this. Chris Bowen said, but a sensible government of grown-ups talks to people in good faith. I've been doing that with the Greens, with the crossbenchers. Lie. He has not talked to us. And I thank the independents and crossbenchers for their engagement. We have tried to engage. We have requested engagement, but not got it. And this is what happens with both the tired old parties. They use words that resonate with people. A sensible government of grown-ups. They're mature. Talks to people in good faith. I've been doing that with the Greens and with the crossbenchers. I thank the independents and crossbenchers for the engagement. Basically a lie, because he's not doing that. But what people remember from that is grown-ups, good faith, consultation, engagement, when it's all false. And that's it's spin that we've got to counter. And then Pauline and I, apart from Sky News with Pauline and I hardly get any traction in the media because they know we come at them with clear arguments and solid data. So the lefty, what we call the mockingbird media, can't counter us, can't refute us, so they just basically ban us.
Yeah, and to make matters worse, and I was looking at Senator Alex Antic from South Australia. He did a post last week saying that he was talking about the digital identity legislation, and the Australian Associated Press fact-checked him, and the Australian Associated Press guys, they write these articles, and they're certified by Facebook to fact-check and de-rank, aka shadow ban your content. So not only is the mainstream media trying to basically shut you out of the picture, a democratic elected a person to Parliament. But they're also, once you try to go around, you've got big tech on the other side also having it out for you. I mean, you never see big tech or the Australian Associated Press going and writing fact checks of left-wing things that, a lot of things surrounding the pandemic, for example. And so it's very frustrating seeing that. And that's why we do what we do here, guys. And that's why it's so essential that I say, and I don't just, it's not a throwaway line, we need you to share these conversations out there. Share them to your friends and family, because this is your taxpayer dollars. This is why you have a massive cost of living crisis. They are passing laws, 30,000 words last
30,000
sitting.
pages. 30,000 pages, Joel.
Oh, God. And is that per year or per parliamentary sort
That
of
was
sitting?
per 3 years of the parliamentary sitting.
It's insane. I'm
It's
reminded
actually
of the
2.5 years.
I'm reminded of the words of, I think it was Kerry Packer. He said, it feels like for every law that you've passed that the country hasn't really gotten much better. How about for every law that you pass, you take away 2 laws or you get rid of one? I think I think there's a lot of average Aussies out there that are very frustrated. But yeah, I mean, that's what these conversations are about. So they are cutting you off at the knees in the Parliament. They are not giving you proper access or equal access to what the crossbenchers like David Pocock are getting.
I think I don't know that that's correct, because
Right.
David spoke very well in the media because of his past position and the fact that he's new. He got a lot of media time, and because of his policies in the woke media, he got that time. He did a very effective job in squawking about the cutting of staff. And I think, I haven't checked with him, but I'm assuming that he got the same staff that we get now,
Right.
because since we put the data back to Anthony Albanese, and he came back and said, okay, you can have another assistant advisor.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming David got that, but I shouldn't assume, because Ralph Babbitt hasn't been notified at all. And he's in
Yeah.
exactly the same position we are.
I've been talking to Ralph, and he's going to appear on the show very soon. He is not taking it down, laying down.
No.
But David Pocock was given this report sooner than you guys, am I
Oh,
right?
yeah, the report for sure. Yeah,
See,
yes.
that is not equal access. And I think there's a
No.
lot of Aussies out there that are thinking, what's going on here? And they do feel that it is very much staged in the way that Parliament is done. They don't want any surprises. They don't want any debate. They want to go in, get out, and just do the job. What are some other issues that are on the parliamentary agenda? I heard about the building code being
Yes.
eradicated. What's the deal with that?
Australian Building and Construction Code. So the government is a very big buyer of construction services and building construction, because they do make a lot of buildings, filling them with bureaucrats usually. So they do, and other construction. So it's very important, because what happens is the CFMEU, and there are many, many fine members of the CFMEU. We are very positive about unions that are well run. The CFMEU, well, let's take to cut it short. The CFMEU wants to get rid of the Australian Building and Construction Commission, because it scrutinises contracts, it scrutinises industrial practices, and it makes sure that there's fairness. We heard one example from Queensland just this morning in the Senate. A Queensland senator was talking about the fact that people from the Together Union had to file a complaint with regard to safety on their worksite, because the CFMEU harassment was so intense. So the CFMEU, some of the CFMEU union bosses are part of a hierarchy that wants to control. They're looking after the political agenda. They pay a lot of money in election campaign funds to the ALP. The ALP wants to look after them.
Yeah.
So the CFMEU is a massive union. Its union bosses are looking after themselves in many cases. Some are sincere. But you saw the CFMEU construction workers in Melbourne raid basically the Setca's office in the downtown Melbourne, because they said, you're not standing up for us on these mandates. Get off your ass and do something. And they really hammered them. So the CFMEU has got many fine rank and file, but what the rank and file don't know with many of the big unions is that they're being played. They pay union dues. Some of that union dues goes to Labor Party campaign funding, despite some of the union workers being supportive of other parties, not the Labor Party. The unions are no longer looking after workers. I'll give you an example.
Mm.
We've been pushing the Hunter Valley situation, where we've had casual workers come to us in the black coal industry saying that they have been abused, serious injuries, totally and permanently incapacitated, disabled, and no proper workers' compensation. In fact, no workers' compensation at all. Sacked
Wow.
if they dare to report their injuries. Now, it's a requirement that they import by law that they report their injuries. Yet they're sacked if they do. They don't have the right long service leave. They don't have annual leave. They are paid 40% less. Their base rate is 40% less than a permanent worker right alongside them doing the same job. The CFMEU wrote the bloody enterprise agreements and in some cases sold the enterprise agreements. So they're not looking after their workers at all. They're making it damaging for workers. And so we had to jump in there. And for 2.5 years, we've been bashing away at that. And we've had many successes, but we've still got a long way to go. The Labor Party, the CFMEU turned a blind eye. Both the federal and state turned a blind eye. The Liberals didn't want to do anything about it. So what you'll see is union bosses exploiting workers, and you'll see union bosses doing it for their own power, their own political power, their own political careers. They're doing it for Labor Party dues. So that's what the Australian Building and Construction Commission is about, overseeing the industry to make sure it's run fairly and lawfully. And the union, one of the first things Labor's doing is getting rid of that. So that's where we're going to have to get our information together. We supported the reintroduction of the ABCC back in 2016.
Yeah.
And now it looks like it's on the way out. But hopefully some of the crossbenchers will stand up with us for the workers.
Yeah, I've got a video here just so people can see exactly what was going on. I predicted, and I'll let the video speak for itself here.
We're on the brink, and a lot of people don't realize this, we're on the brink of a union revolution.
People obviously very, very upset. This was off the backdrop of the mandates not being dropped and the construction sites being closed in Victoria. I do believe this was in about August or September last year.
That timing sounds about right. Maybe October. Yes, August, September.
Yeah, guys, look, this is some serious stuff, and that video.
You need to explain to them that need to explain to viewers that is union members,
Yes,
rising up against their union bosses.
Yes, so the context was, so that first video, that was Anomaly. He's an American show. He's been giving a lot of airtime to Aussies when we were going through a lot of the toughest lockdowns, especially the police treatment in New South Wales, especially Victoria. And I was on a live with him the day before this happened, and I predicted, I said, guys, we're on the verge of a union revolution. The unions are not representing their members. And so what you saw there was Dan Andrews came out with this announcement, essentially, that they basically weren't going to allow the construction sites to be opened. And this was during the week when they had all of the, I mean, so much has happened this last year. They were having those protests at lunchtime, at tea time. They were going out camping at the front of the streets. They were having tea to protest against the mandates, the jabs, the construction sites being locked down. And then we saw this massive uprising of people, tens of thousands of tradies hitting the roads in their fluoro uniforms. You know, what is this move by construction? Bringing it back to construction, what is this move that's going on? Are they consolidating power with the unions that help Labor get elected?
Well, you'll notice that Dan Andrews, yes, that Labor Party is consolidating power with some of the monopoly unions. And that's what fundamentally happens here, Joel. Wherever you see a monopoly, it's usually enabled by government legislation. And when you see a monopoly, they don't have to be smart, savvy. They don't have to service their customers, their members, because they just do whatever they want to do. There's no alternative. Now, Queensland has a new union called the Red Union, and it's in teaching. It's also in nursing, and it's moving into doctors. And its union dues are considerably less because they don't give money to political parties, and they never will. But what they're doing is that they're standing up for their members against the mandates. The teachers' union in Queensland just folded. The nursing union in Queensland folded, and they just threw their teachers and nurses to the wolves. Whereas the Red Union is standing up now. Anastasia Palaszczuk has brought in legislation in Queensland, or is bringing in legislation in Queensland, to make it very difficult for the Red Union to exist. They want their monopoly there. But what we're seeing is workers saying, we've had enough of this. You're not looking after us. We're paying thousands of dollars in union dues. You're not looking after us. We want to start running the union properly. So it is an uprising in the union ranks. In the coal mining industry, when I was a miner at the coalface, and then when I was a mine manager, every single black coal miner in the country was unionized. Now they're not, because people are sick and tired of paying thousands of dollars in union dues and not getting anything back for it other than donations of their money to the Labor Party.
It's astonishing, because the purpose of a union, and this may seem like a no-brainer, guys, but just for those of you that don't know, or you don't interact with unions, they are meant for collective bargaining. It's meant to be together strong. You go with a bunch of people in your same profession, you come together and you make the point that we want better working conditions, we want safer environment, we want higher pay. But what's happened now is they become completely unrepresentative in New South Wales, in Victoria, in Queensland, and the union members aren't happy. And this is the thing. Just like with social media, just like with political parties, just like with the mainstream media, if they don't do their job, other unions will start up and they will start to undercut them.
But then in this case in Queensland, where there is a very savvy group of people who know how to run a union, they're now being nobbled by the state government. But Joel, it's not quite as you said, because my take on it is slightly different. Unions were formed back in the late 19th century. That's largely when they came out, because of exploitation of workers. Safety, pay rates, continuity of employment, retirement provisions, and there's one other one I'm missing. But basically, they were the five. Every one of those five is now enshrined in legislation. So this is not my idea. What I'm about to tell you came from a CFMEU vice president who worked with me in setting up a radically new mine that was improved conditions for miners, because we saw that was the best way to look after our people. And at a time when we had other mines having 40% turnover of staff, we had 1%. And that's it. And that's very, very important, because if you've got continuity of employment, then you have much higher productivity and less safety issues, less accidents, and you have greater loyalty and less turnover and training costs. So we did that deliberately. We didn't pay them extraordinary wages. They were extraordinary, but they're no more extraordinary than anyone else in Central Queensland. So it wasn't by money that we did it. It was by managing them properly, recruiting them properly, etc., and looking after them, having the best safety performance in the country, the genuine best safety performance. And one of the CFMEU vice presidents, Jim Lambley, said to me that what his union had lost, this is back in 1990, had lost, was the idea of serving its members. And he said, that's what unions are here for. And when we pointed out to Jim that all of the basic reasons for a union are now in legislation, he said, that's exactly the point. We need to provide a service for our thousands of dollars of union dues. That was 30 years ago. The CFMEU's got worse since then. And now there are some very good CFMEU members and some good CFMEU union bosses. I certainly mean that sincerely. I've had dealings with them. And the things that we saw in the Hunter Valley and that we're still working on, devastating workers, killing workers, crippling workers. We went to someone in the CFMEU in the construction division, and they knew about it and they put some pressure on, but it still didn't work. So that, what we've got to do is to shake them up by not banning unions, continuing unions, but making sure they've got competition so that people have a choice. And then if they don't like what the CFMEU is doing, they go to another union.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I totally agree with that. Malcolm, I can't believe we're already 30 minutes in. Is there anything?
You better go.
is there anything specifically you want to leave with my audience? Obviously, you're just getting started in Parliament. We'll get into the nitty gritty of some of these bills as we get more and more information about them. But the floor is yours.
Well, all I want to say is, Joel, echo your comments about the media, the Mockingbird media, the lamestream media, the what's the other term we use? The legacy media is dying. People are fewer and fewer people are willing to pay for it, but it is still highly influential. It maintains the narrative that we can only have two parties. It maintains support for Liberal and Labor. So and they won't come after us. I know for a fact that a man told me his daughter worked for a major Sky News. I'll just put it out there, Sky News, and she said she had seen a piece of paper with the names of politicians who were not allowed to appear on Sky News, and I was one of them.
Wow.
So I know we also know there's only one journalist on the ABC who will turn to me, and that's every few months. So the Mockingbird media is dead. So switch off from them. The anti-social media is what I call the social media. It's anti-social media. They're lying. If you don't agree with their views, then you get suppressed and squashed. We know that's happening. So there's only one alternative. That's people like yourself, independent media, truth-seeking media, the new people's media, if you like. And it's very, very important to get behind people like yourself. And I'd also recommend people have a listen to tntradio.live, tntradio.live. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I am, yes, actually, yeah.
It was started by a wealthy, successful business founder, and he's pouring money into it. It's a global operation. It's run out of Queensland, but they have hosts in Tel Aviv, in Belfast, in London, in Los Angeles, in New York, and just about everywhere else in between. And during the week, they're trained journalists, or they're people with very wide experience. For example, they've had some people, senior levels of the CIA and other similar organizations. And on the weekends, they have some of them, but they also have people like myself who just bring a fair dinkum flavor to it. So every second week, I'm on TNT Radio, and we do interviews on the topics that people are not allowed to talk about on the social media. So we get COVID, we get climate change, we get the war in Ukraine, and what we do is we get real experts who are not afraid to talk. So for goodness sake, support Joel, support other independent media, support the podcasters. Just make sure that the word gets out.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for what you're doing, Joel.
No, it's my pleasure. And guys, if you want to follow Malcolm Roberts, it's Malcolm Roberts on Facebook. He does some phenomenal work with commentary, but also some great memes on there. I don't know who you've got running the meme page, but it's absolutely hilarious. We share the same sense of humor, Malcolm. And he's also on Instagram as well. Be sure to follow him there. And remember to click notifications for him so you always see when he posts or when he goes live. And yeah, guys, Turning Point Australia, we're here to support our freedom senators. When I heard about the cuts that were being made to them, I thought this is ridiculous. We need to support them however it is, whether that's taking the load off with legislation, whether that's getting the word out there when they need to get the word out there. So please give this a share. If you guys are comfortable sharing, it's the best thing you can do to support these conversations. And also, if you want to donate to support the show so that we're able to get it out there, please do. And we've got a big announcement next week, Malcolm, and you're going to love this one because you're going to be a special guest there. But we've got a huge announcement next Wednesday. Our first national tour is happening, and we're getting some talent from overseas. We're very excited to start the Turning Point Australia tours. It's been a long time coming. And Malcolm, we would love to see you and some of the other Freedom Senators at the show. But thank you for joining me today, Senator, and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much. Likewise, keep up the great work, Joel.